with government bodies like Homes England and the planning system is it's just under-resourced. And fundamentally, even if you want to, try and have a detailed conversation, the guys are just so spread, all down to money, all down to staffing, and probably experience to a degree. But that's the same on planning.
We're still not sure. We're still not entirely sure if they are under-resourced.
No,
we're still question marks over performance and leadership and how they monitor those performance indicators.
Yeah, some are, seriously, but others no, and they just make excuses, or they don't, and they perform really well, like that.
But I think, from the beef around the table around planning will be a whole host of things in terms of getting access, getting a conversation. Is there a point of a pre-app anyway? And then the sheer length of time that it takes to get through the process. Linda, we've now had royal assent for the Levelling and Up and Regeneration Act, which, paraphrasing I think, and you can explain, is we've now got an act, but it now needs to have a lot of legislation to hang off it.
Yes.
So are we really any nearer?
No. In a word, right. I fully accept what we're saying around the table, and I don't want to lay housing delivery issues completely at the door of planning and local authority plans, because that's not the case. As you said earlier, it's a whole raft of things that all come together to make the perfect or imperfect storm. But planning is a big part of that. Now, ironically, the whole part of this new planning act that got royal assent on 26th of October is to speed up the planning process. This planning act that actually started several years ago, about 5 years ago now, with the white paper and the future of planning, has been 17 months in Parliament. It's been planning ping pong. One of the ladies on social media calls it planning ping pong, one of the solicitors. And it's going to be going backwards and forwards between the House of Lords and the House of Commons. 17 months to do a speed up of the planning process. Now, I appreciate that in the grand scheme of things is not a huge amount of time, but it's still massive when you think they're trying to speed up the planning process. And there's all sorts of things in there that I'm a bit worried about, to be honest. Now, in fairness, it being the time of year, the Planning Act is like a Christmas tree. It's like a bare, completely bare. Think of a pine tree stood in there. What is now going to have to happen is we're going to have to hang planning baubles. So the decorations, all of the bits, in this case, the supplementary legislation that is going to have to come after this is now going to have to be hung onto the planning Christmas tree. Now, the community infrastructure levy, which is part and parcel of this, is going to be replaced, and arguably Section 106 agreements. They're all going to be put into one infrastructure levy. That could take 10 years. It could take 10 years to create, to bed in, and for local authorities to get used to it, and developers to get used to it. Now, community infrastructure levy is not negotiable. I suspect the infrastructure levy will not be negotiable. So gone are going to be the days of negotiating your Section 106 agreements. So that's a massive change. But one of the big changes for the Act is that it's giving local authorities, it's 537 pages. I have skimmed it. I've not read every single page. It took a while for it to go to press. But it's 537 pages. And now, if this is meant to speed up the planning process, God help us. So what they've done is they've given local planning authority powers to refuse to deal with a planning application if a particular developer, if an applicant has failed to perform previously or has built out a development slowly. So that is horribly negative.
There's no judge and jury in the
planning
department.
It's like the planning authority sitting there going, well, you didn't build that quickly enough, go on, make my day. That's a horrendous thing to do. It's horrible. Now, on the one hand, it sounds very negative to me. On the other hand, I understand it's Parliament putting their foot down, giving the local authority powers and saying, look, you've got to build these things quickly. Well, okay, if the developers have got to build these things quickly, you've got to decide the applications quickly. You can't muck about with these things. And quite honestly, what we were talking about earlier, once you've got planning permission, that's not the end of it. You then have to discharge planning conditions. And quite honestly, they're putting more and more conditions on simply because, in my view, that all of my opinions here are my own. I'm not representing anybody. But a lot of the problems with too many conditions is the inexperience of the planners. So you end up with these pages and pages of that all have to be discharged. And the discharge of planning conditions goes right to the bottom of the pile because they deal with the planning applications first. And it can take months.
And then it impacts on funding, we're back to costs and resource, and a developer just can't keep his 5 staff sitting there whilst he's waiting to get on site.
But the problem with, if you don't discharge the planning conditions, it can then, very importantly, it can have the effect of invalidating the entire consent. So you have to discharge. And then if you come to sell, you'll get the nice conveyancing solicitors who I train with these things. They'll come along and say, the planning conditions haven't been discharged. They'll advise their client not to buy the property because there's a risk. It's all very well you can say, we'll have an indemnity insurance policy. Okay, fine. It's not a cover-all. It's not something that I wouldn't be buying a house. I'd be walking away.
So I think conclusion is it's not a fix at the moment. But is there anything, if you were sat in the seat and let's take it to the table or around the table, what can be done?
One of the other things with the Planning Act is it talks about digitisation. There was this whole big row about whether planning committees can be online, whether you can make representations on that. Finally, they've done this hybrid thing where you can attend online. So that's one thing. But they talk about speeding up the local plan making process, which is, the local plan is fundamental, and that's where you get your development management policies, and that's the policies you're supposed to follow. They've said, they've done this whole big, ta-da, we're going to do a speeded up planning process. It's going to be a 30-month. And I thought, do they mean 13 months? No, 2.5 year local plan process. I rest my case.
So, if we were all sat in seats, what is the thing around the table? What can or would you do or think could be done to actually start to solve? And I mean, it'll probably be a sticking plaster, but what could we do to solve it, improve it?
They've tried to add the planning performance agreements, haven't they? Yeah. It'd be interesting to get your take on it, but we've never done one. And I don't know if anybody else on the table has done one, but I'd like to know whether they actually...
It probably leads into my answer, which is that you'll just see reason for delay anyways. They'll just generate a reason for delaying the performance.
Even if you might specifically into contracts with the council.
Yeah, so it goes back to pre-app and the development of that. There's got to be something more stringent on planning decision, and if you get a refusal, how quickly that appeal process undertakes. I think that for me would be the biggest thing. The only other thing I would add in is standardisation of 106 into local authority. They've tried to tell me for 7 years that they've tried it before, but they've never engaged with developers. It's as simple as that. If they engage with us and write it together, the standardised version will be very efficient.
When I used to work for the Homebuilders Federation, when I was a Northern Regions Policy Manager for HBF, what they were trying to do at that point, and this is some years ago now, they were trying to introduce community infrastructure levy as a whole, and they were trying to get rid of Section 106 group because that was what developers, large multinationals, had said is the sticking point. And then they backtracked and said, no, actually, because they realised they weren't going to be able to negotiate. So, and these are like the big boys of house building. And so you ended up, instead of a whole community infrastructure levy, it got split. So you still stuck with Section 106 agreements, and the community infrastructure levy isn't mandatory. So some councils use it, others, we're not bothering. So that is a fundamental problem, because that to bed in is going to just create delays, because the councils are going to have to get to grips with it, and new developers are going to have to get to
But in terms of 106, there's a number of the of authority to it now. You've got your viability assessment, and they say, okay, well, we'll waive, what would have been your, contribution or affordable housing contribution or so. But they're then putting in almost look back clauses. So when you finish a scheme, we'll go back and reassess, which I suspect may have impacts from a valuation point of view. Correct. It certainly has impacts from a funder looking at it in terms of the ambiguity and the what if happens.
There's no certainty.
I think that's the case. I think to sort of turn this around its head, and we've spoken probably quite negatively about the local authority planning process. At the end of the day, they are the custodians of the space that we provide in terms of the built environment. I think that's the other bit that we've probably got to remember. And it's easier to possibly say no to something and not have it delivered than have something delivered that's an absolute mess.
Which is why we have PDR. We're now moving away from PDR because we're creating things that's not fit for the future.
There's also the design code as well that Trafford, they're adopting the design code, which is a really interesting one because it takes away. Basically, it's going to be so granular that each road will have design ideas, and there's going to be a code for each road. So you get to the point where architects don't have the freedom to actually develop or draw interest in it. It's a really interesting one, the design code.
It's all about creating beautiful homes.
But it's still very subjective, isn't it?
It is, exactly. And that's where it takes the certainty away.
Well, the design code should take that out, that they should make everything more standardised. That's the intention.
Yeah, but how long is it going to take before each one? Because that's in the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, and some might have already started looking at design codes. I mean, certainly some of the heritage cities will have done. But how long is it going to take now for local authorities to get their design codes in place? And what is that? Does that mean that they will hold the applications and say, no, we can't deal with that until we've got our design code? That's going to take 2 years.
Deliverable and it's just not fit for purpose. I think is the issue with the planning process. And there's loads of sort of details around resources, etc. But if we were in a tech company, we'd be in a room now thinking, right, how do we design the product, and how can we make it quickly and get it in the right way and support it? It's broken from sort of start to finish. You even go back into technology. Local government is way behind even central government now. You can file your taxes online. The government gateway is getting better and better. Yeah. There is no visibility when you submit a planning application to see where it is. You've got no ability to interact with it, or very limited ability. Whereas in the real world now, even when you're buying a pad of paper off the internet, you can see where it is in a plan.
But an IT shoot will solve elements of that. Well, we've got to go out to 6, 7, 8 different consultees. Yeah. And how many times you find, we can't get it to committee today because we're still waiting for.
To be honest, it's even before that.
To comment or whatever.
If you know at the start, a lot of the problems we've had, if you know at the start of the application what you need to do, you can spend the time doing what you need to do rather than waiting to hear for 7, 8, 9 months what you need to do, what they expect, then going and doing it, then having it critiqued. If almost at the start of the process is, look, even if it was belt and braces, this project's a bit sensitive, we want everything. We want literally everything we can get hold of. Right, we'll go and do that. We'll do it now.
Do that, wouldn't you?
We'd rather go and do it, and we'd rather submit it and know it's submitted and see the comments. I think the other fundamental thing as well about resourcing is that you've got, the local authority planning teams have got a huge amount of householder applications that are flowing in left, right, centre, various things. And then you've also got more strategically important or developer-led, and it's all being handled in the same sort of pot. And these things need, for me, and again, I might go a little bit right-wing on this at the minute, but they almost need splitting, where I feel if the strategically important ones are outsourced to planning consultants, you've almost got you can almost rely on the professional indemnity insurance, the planning consultant to say, look, we've reviewed this, it's policy compliant. If it's not delegated, even when it goes in front of members, they like moving risk away, don't they? I've got somebody, third party, telling me this is we should do this. It's either that for me or the opposite. We've got to push the householder applications out into some sort of insured market to say if you can insure your householder application and then you submit your insurance policy to the planning team, then we will issue conditional consent based upon the insurers would be the one that we would achieve a loss.
I may have misread a little bit, but is there
Sorry, Alex. It's a move almost back to thoughts around local development corporations. Is that, have I misread that somewhere?
Yeah, no.
Does that tie in a little bit to what Dave's saying there?
And that, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I've done a crib sheet here because yes, there are going to be local development corporation type groups, but to be perfectly honest, that just adds another layer of bureaucracy. You're just going to have to go down and down and down.
From what I hear, their initial objective is the land bank in the development corporation. So actually, then you do just add another layer in.
And just on the points of kind of planning committee, I mean, I've been involved in a few, and I have a very, very kind of clear view on, the role of politics and the politicians within the planning committee. I just can't get my head around why that is not just more of a commercial bunch of people involved in the committee rather than all the politicians.
Bear in mind the case officer. I think the amount of times that something goes and recommended for approval and then it
gets
rejected.
But if we have a set of design codes or principles, surely that then is a step to getting rid of the committee.
Well, the problem you've got, I was on one earlier this year, and it had been recommended for approval. It gone in a second time. There was one thing that we were not happy with, but it got resolved. And the only person in the room who was uncomfortable with the refusal decision was the council solicitor, who's saying, listen, this is very difficult for us to make this decision. And
that happens.
That's the basis.
Some of the comments as well.
And and I'm not sort of having a slight on elected members of a difficult position, because sometimes they're voting for something that, particularly around election cycles, that absolutely should be done, which is absolute carnage for the political career. So
they don't want to be involved, do you?
Yeah, it's like, and that's why things get pushed. I think no one attends the planning committee before election cycle. So it is difficult, and it's not almost laying the blame on any one individual. We've just got to come up with an environment that allows things to function.
Back to commerciality, but I think it's not blind commerciality, because
I think the consensus around the table is that you'd pay for a proper service, and you pay probably quite a lot for proper service.
Well, you're going to have to. When the new fees come in, 35%, and I mean that's going to come in well before Christmas, and then there's also before Christmas, in my view, there's going to be a new national planning policy framework. They've been waiting for the Act to get a royal assent, and now that that's done, there's a new national planning policy framework that is going to come in. That's another.
But is there anything about money and resourcing?
I think it's one there for me. I think it's almost a little bit of a misnomer as well. I think the financial side, because you have to attract the right people into the planning authorities. Unless you're paying ridiculous salaries, it's pretty.
Everyone goes into the private sector.
It's a difficult role, isn't it? So it's a hard job, isn't it?
That's what I mean. In councils, get good, get recognised as being, really hot on what they do, and then they get snapped up by local consultants.
You need the money, absolutely, but you're just not particularly attractive.
But outsourcing, I mean, they've tried that a number of times. That equally isn't the solution either, is it?
It isn't.
Well, certainly the outsourcing. I think quite a lot of councils are looking at that. They're looking more on the householder application side. The only thing for me is obviously when they're increasing the fees, you just got to make sure that increasing the fees goes to the right place. So if it is to deal with householder application, it can't be to fix the roads. It needs to be something around planning.
The problem is what is going to happen, because everybody now knows that the increasing fees is on the horizon. The councils are going to be inundated with planning applications. Now, I have a couple of clients come to put my application in now before the fees come in, because it will save that 35%. So what's going to happen, there's going to be a deluge of planning applications. Performance is going to nosedive again because there's too much in. So between now and possibly next spring, there is going to be a decline in performance because they'll be inundated with applications.
Well, it's going to be a bigger mess, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because the applications are going to be poor as well.
Yeah.
So then we're going to have full validation.
They're going to be fully conceived. Yes.
The only way to deal with that is to outsource, because they're not going to solve that problem in the next 18, 24 months.
No, exactly.
They've got to temporarily even. I've just had a chat before, didn't we, about we saw a local authority get to a huge amount of householder applications in a very short space of time. They brought in some outsourced consultants just for 6-7 months, and they just cleared the load out. There's some very simple ones that are just sitting
porches and garages.
Yeah, and
rear
they just cleared the
extensions.
decks out,
Yeah.
you know, and you know, we were jumping on as Capita on the phone in 1 week,
Yeah.
and somebody else is on in
Yeah.
another week, and then out they came again. So it's, you know, it's the only
possible.
way really. It's
Yeah.
possible, yeah.
Yeah, it's possible.
I also think that 35% increase is enough. I'd welcome a bigger increase as long as that money goes, as I said, to the right place.
Yeah.
When you actually look at plan application and your actual growth development cost, it's tiny. And if you can have something, and this is why I think that planning performance agreement, the concept of that is right. If you can get something that's contractually, that the council will abide by, and it benefits you, then you pay over the odds for that.
There have to be ramifications. though.
And it's both sides. Obviously, you've got to provide the information, the quality submission. But if you know what you need to provide and you provide it, then there has to be, you know, come to the table and some agreement from the other side.
And I mean, they brought in permission in principle. And again, I've never used that because, quite frankly, you've got outline planning applications. Why would you just not use that? Why overcomplicate it? And permitted development rights. Very briefly, I wanted to just touch on permitted development rights. Permitted development rights were great when they were arguably, when they were introduced in 2013. Convert an office building into residential. Great, let's go. Don't even need to submit drawings. Well, that was a bit of a nightmare because what ended up doing is people were developing caves. They were doing living rooms and bedrooms with no windows. Hence, they had to bring in this adequate levels of natural daylight thing, which I was disgusted with that people were doing that. But it's your own fault. You were saying to people, you don't need to submit drawings. Really? Okay, fine. But now, from 2013, from the initial temporary introduction, we've now got this overly complicated, way more expensive system of permitted development, I don't call it permitted development, prior approval procedure, which is just as complicated, if not more in certain circumstances, as a full planning application. The only benefit of the permitted development rights, for example, if you're changing an office building and it's a Class E building now to 100 flats, that would then have 97 quid to change, 96 quid to change it. Now it's £100 per flat. So the increase in that has gone up. But you've got this raft of requirements that you have to submit with it. And if it doesn't comply with any one of those, you get a refusal. And also the only thing that you've got with prior approval procedure at the moment is you're exempt, if you provide 100 flats, you're exempt from a Section 106 agreement. So there's no requirement for affordable housing. But once the Act gets further along and we end up with an infrastructure levy, I predict that that will go by the by. So what would be then the point of this whole the permitted development rights prior approval procedure? Absolute waste of time. You might as well just submit full planning.
The only way you'll be able to negotiate is your affordable or your contributions to
No, because if they bring in, if they bring in an infrastructure levy, which is akin to the community infrastructure levy that we've got now, it's a tariff, it's a fixed tariff and a roof tax, and you're not going to be able to negotiate your affordable. It will all be in. Now, they've not definitely said it's all going to be in the infrastructure levy, because they've said it will do away with some Section 106, and you think, oh, give me strength. So it might not, you might have to provide it. That might be a way of them saying you have to provide affordable and you have to provide the contributions. There's no getting away from it. But I don't know, because nobody's seen what they do. There's a consultation out, but it finished in summer and there's been nothing further from that.
Well, if there were ever a topic that was going to take us over time,
I know.
Hence why we did it. I mean, unless anybody has got any burning topic, comment, view, subject that we've not covered that they want to throw in, can I say thank you very much for your time and contributions.
Very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Guys. Thank you.